Imagine from the second you released your first piece of art, the second you received any slight recognition of your work and effort, you were immediately labeled as saviors and hailed as the second coming of your idols that influenced and created some of the most influential and greatest pieces of art in your medium. From the get-go, you had the weight of the world and expectations on your shoulders, and you actually lived up to it. That's absolutely fucking crazy. But that's the story of Trivium. But with all of that hype, why were they hated by elitists like me and the old heads of the metal community for so long? And how exactly did they actually live up to the hype? And what is it about their music that propelled them to the heights that they reached? The answers to all of these questions are actually kind of clear once we have the conversations about them, so let's get into it. The true genius of Trivium comes from a story about their hype, a type of hype that was absolutely unparalleled in the history of metal. So let's go back to 2004, after Trivium released their first album, From Ember to Inferno. Metal was quickly changing, especially in the underground, with the deathcore scene starting to really explode. People were actively looking for new torchbearers for this millennia of music. Despite this, all bands in metal start in the gutter, playing shitty little clubs that smell like a mix of piss, weed, and degeneracy. I mean, we've all been to a venue just like this, packed with less than 200 people to see what we think is the greatest band of all time that no one else seems to appreciate. It's all part of the metal experience. Trivium also started playing in shitty little piss-smelling clubs, but it was incredibly short-lived, because once they released their second album, things took off for them in a way it never did for any other band in the history of metal. When Ascendancy dropped, it was like a nuke on the metal scene to the level people hadn't experienced in years. Likely since Vulgar Display dropped in '92, and Trivium instantly became every 15-year-old's favorite metal band. To the point where once they were on the final leg of their first real tour, the Road Rage tour with Roadrunner Records, people in the UK were chanting their name over established bands like Chimera and Machine Head. Quote, "It just seemed to kick off from the moment we stepped on stage," Matt Hafey recalls. "The reception totally blew us away. Afterwards, we were still buzzing, so we decided to go out to the merch table to meet the fans. And even though the other bands were playing, it seemed like most of the crowd came out to chat with us." Alright, so right out of the gate, Trivium has become incredibly popular, but the second they dropped Ascendancy, things changed dramatically. This album skyrocketed Trivium's popularity into fucking orbit, to the point where they were invited to play the Download Fest and co-headline a stage with bands like Anthrax, Metallica, and Black Sabbath. For a band that had only released 2 albums to that point and only done 1 real tour, that's fucking insane. And that's really where their hype train truly started. Ascendancy was a huge smack in the face to the current metal elite, showing the old bands that new blood was quickly coming up on their tails to take their crown. And the old heads of the scene, as well as myself and other metal elitists at the time, didn't think it was cool at all. And when these guys got on stage at Download Fest 2005, their popularity truly exploded to heights never really seen before in the scene. I mean, look at this magazine cover from Kerrang in 2005. Sabbath, Maiden, Metallica, Trivium. That's a crazy amount of hype for a band 2 albums and 2 tours into their career. And at this point in the early 2000s, the metal community was really looking for a new torchbearer. The next legendary band to straddle the line between mainstream and underground extreme music, like Metallica and Pantera had done before them. Trivium took this and ran with it. But man, shit like that magazine cover triggered a younger me and other incel elitists into fucking orbit. I remember seeing it on a shelf at a 7-Eleven during lunchtime. Trivium instantly got labeled as metalcore and poser metal because, for whatever reasons, metal culture has this crab bucket mentality. The second any band becomes successful, especially as quick as Trivium became, some nerd on the internet will ingest a fucking laxative and start shitting on them to make themselves feel better about the trash that they listen to. You know, they're too mainstream, or they're just a Metallica clone, or they're poser metalcore garbage. And usually it's just internet black metal lords pushing this narrative, but this time, even the old head bands of the metal scene were kind of getting fed up with Trivium. I mean, these little shits were 18, 19 years old, touring the world with funds that were never available to these older bands when they were their age. And they were cocky as hell, because it wasn't just Kerrang that were stating these guys were the next big thing. It was literally every mainstream publication sucking these guys and their eyeliner wearing asses off. Yeah, they wore eyeliner back in the day. Quote, "There are definitely things I said when I was 18 or 19 years old where if I could go back in time, I'd slap myself in the face and say, 'Stop it, you little asshole.' Our label was encouraging us to play up the sex, drugs, and rock and roll angles, saying, 'Talk about this stuff that you're doing.' People like that stuff. And at 18, 19 years old, you're happy to take that guidance. It wasn't like we weren't doing these things, but I can see how people would think we were cocky little bastards. So between the metalcore sound, the fucking eyeliner, the cocky attitude, and all the publications touting these guys as the goats at 18, yeah, it pissed everyone off. I remember being 14 years old and just wanting nothing to do with Trivium. It was so dumb. I mean, can you blame us? Look at the headline, Trivium resurrects thrash. In 2004 or 2005, there was a whole new wave of thrash metal coming out like Evil and Warbringer and Bonded by Blood. It was stuff like this that really triggered people, but that really isn't Trivium's fault. I knew the true cult crowd hated them and I wanted to keep my metal credentials safe, so I had to hate them too. But I think in 2025, that's all in the past. Alright, so we've gotten to the bottom of why Trivium were so hated to start their careers. Let's summarize it. They pissed off the metal elitists with their sound being seen as metalcore in nature, steeped in poser attitude, their emo-ish looks early on, and the incredible hype they got from mainstream publications. And they pissed off the old heads with their cocky attitude, quick ascension to the top of the metal heap, and of course, the hype that surrounded them. And what pissed these groups off most of all was they actually lived up to the hype and surpassed it. And in order to understand what about their music made them live up to the hype, we are going to talk about 4 albums in particular: Ascendancy, The Crusade, Shogun, and What the Dead Men Say. And before we get into that, I want to ask you, do you think Trivium are one of the greatest metal bands of all time? Why or why not? I'll see you in the comments down below. And don't forget to subscribe and smash the like button if you love metal content to help this get out to other Trivium fans and other metal fans. Thank you so much. Ascendancy is looked back on as one of the best albums of the new wave of American metal in the early 2000s. And rightfully so. There's such great music on there, some all-time bangers that really cemented Trivium's style for the rest of their careers. It was here that we first got a taste of the secret sauce to Trivium's addicting style. There's just something about the music that is uplifting, that makes you want to sing along and fight an army of orcs, all while being undeniably heavy. Trivium's trademark ability is the ability to straddle that line between extreme music and melodic mainstream hooks and choruses. And that was created here. Take a listen. Those melodic, hooky choruses would become defining pieces of Trivium's music and defining parts of their careers going forward. The writing of Matt Heafy really showed its potential here, and that's what makes Ascendancy one of Trivium's most important albums. Ascendancy was so beloved for its mix of thrash and melodic metalcore, which was huge at the time with bands like Shadows Fall and Killswitch Engage. Taking inspiration from the Swedish melodic death metal bands of the 90s, melodic metalcore was the new huge thing in metal, and Ascendancy put Trivium squarely on top of this new movement. This album had everything you'd want from those early American metalcore bands, and it is likely the greatest melodic metalcore album ever released. When you release an album that's uber successful like that, one that skyrockets you to the top of your peer list, you want to keep doing the same thing over and over again. But if they just released Ascendancy over and over again, the hype would have died right there. And it almost did with the Crusade. To understand what makes Trivium geniuses that lived up to the hype, we have to understand where they failed and why. When you have a smash hit like Ascendancy, you want to build off that success. Well, Trivium kind of just tried to make the album again, except it just wasn't as good. It lacked all the amazing melodic choruses and thrash metalcore blend that made Ascendancy so goated, and Heafy's vocals sounded so strained and forced. It feels like he didn't really know where to go with them. In fact, the Crusade just kind of sounds like a whole band who doesn't know where to go next or what to do next. When you listen to these next tracks off the Crusade, I really want you to think about Ascendancy and how Ascendancy sounded in comparison. Check it out.
Just when they thought you were through, you burned the lies, now you're striking it true. Turn your backs on your enemies, and this is motherfuckers part in the dead of day. Can't see it, that the world's up and taking in, we are enemies. A man determined to dominate everything. An example of courage. No way will shatter these girls. Shatter these girls. Dreams of regal claws, paws of a tiger. Waterfalls from her head, what they left her to. Swim through oceans of suffering. Climb to the falls of Dragon Gate. Become. Transform from koi into a beast. Dragon.
It sounds like a band that is afraid to fail. A band that is scared of the hype that surrounded them after Ascendancy. And in the early days when they used to say Trivium are just Metallica clones, well, it really started here. The Crusade isn't terrible, there are some banger tracks to be sure, but it just didn't hit as hard as Ascendancy, and that's a massive disappointment with how hugely successful Ascendancy was. And Heafy's vocals, which are now seen as a strength of the band, just didn't really cut it on the Crusade. But we already know this wouldn't come to define their career. True geniuses take their lumps and grow from it, and I think moving off producer Jason Swakoff was a good first start. He's great, but the luster I think wore off with the Crusade. It didn't sound as full, it didn't pack the punch of Ascendancy or even From Ember to Inferno. What made Trivium so great up to this point was their mix of thrash and metalcore, taking that new style of melodic metalcore and infusing it with the old style of thrash. Matt Heafy's vocal melodies are powerful and clear, and his deep growls hit really deep. They're a very guitar and vocal driven band to be sure, but the shine had kind of worn off. I mean, even Ascendancy isn't necessarily a unique or groundbreaking piece of music. It's just awesome all the way through. But it doesn't flip the scene on its head. It doesn't surpass the hype that surrounds Trivium. I would argue that it doesn't even give Trivium their own truly unique sound. Ascendancy was just fitting in with what was cool at the time, and the Crusade was just them trying not to mess with the cool stuff off of Ascendancy. And they ended up just sounding like they ripped off their heroes. They didn't sound very original. And to do that, they needed to mix in the influence of their heroes with their own sound. And the key to that would be embracing their love for death metal. It's no secret that Matt Heafy, Corey Bailu, and the crew are all huge metalheads and respect our culture with the utmost importance. But it seemed like instead of embracing that love, The first 3 albums were either just trying to do what was popular or outright copying what they loved. I've spoken before on the importance of being a metalhead when writing the best metal possible. All the greatest bands are merely building off of what came before them, and Trivium started using this genius move on Shogun. They tuned even lower to include more 7-string and 5-string bass in their music. This allowed them to explore different ways of writing music and allowed them to include more heavier parts in the music and explore their love of melodic death metal a little more. While the lower strings were used on the Crusade, it was used very sparingly. This is basically a new thing for them on Shogun. Let's take a listen to some of the new death metal infused phrasing that they included on Shogun. Trivium's ability to tie in their best asset, those catchy, melodic, hooky choruses from their first 3 albums, with the beauty and brutality of death metal, spawned their own unique sound that isn't found anywhere else in metal. And that unique piece of music that was spawned on this album helped Trivium secure their position in metal's upper echelon of elite players. No self-respecting metalhead could listen to Shogun and still say, oh, these guys are just a Metallica ripoff. Trivium had found their thing, their own unique addition to metal's short but storied history. They could no longer be held down by any one label like metalcore or thrash metal, as their sound had developed way beyond either. Shogun itself is filled to the brim with unique phrasing and mind-blowing writing that, especially in 2008 when it was released, you couldn't really find in metal's mainstream. Trivium had truly become the next Metallica, as everyone said they would. Unfortunately, that doesn't always mean good things. After Shogun, that genius that we saw spawned on Ascendancy and Shogun, it kind of just disappeared. In Waves isn't a bad album by any means, but it's missing the secret ingredient that they had on Shogun. Vengeance Falls was basically a Disturbed album with some harsher vocals and occasional blast beats, and not just because David Draymond helped produce it. It really does sound like a Disturbed album. Silence in the Snow foregoed all harsh vocals, kinda like on The Crusade. The Heavies' vocals sounded great for sure, but there isn't much to this album in reality. And it was at this point that perhaps the elitists were being proven right. Perhaps Trivium were just a middling arena rock band with a couple good albums.
You were the chosen one! Bring balance to the force!
Just like Metallica did after the Black Album, Trivium had forgot what made their music so impactful. They tried to write more arena rock style music, and they succeeded in that. These albums aren't terrible, but they forgot what made Shogun the masterpiece that it is. And that is their love of death metal. Bands like In Flames, Pestilence, Death, these are what the best parts of Trivium are inspired by. And I feel like bringing in a drummer like Alex Bent in 2017 was a huge key in getting them back on track. I mean, when you're drumming for a band like Brain Drill, you're obviously going to bring more death metal influence, and this is exactly what Trivium needed. You definitely saw them back on track with The Sin in the Sentence, but they weren't fully back to Shogun era style of awesomeness. It is my opinion that in 2020, a full 15 years after they released Ascendancy, they released their magnum opus, the true album that would define their sound for all time. What the Dead Men Say is basically a perfect metal album. It takes everything, every aspect from metal's history and mixes it all into one package, proving that Trivium truly are the genius product of all of the giants that came before them. What the Dead Men Say is a perfect culmination of 50 years of metal history, from Matt's melodic choruses, Alex Bent's punishing blast beats, and Corey's leads. And they brought their melodic death metal inspirations back in full force, combining them with the high-flying vocal melodies and hooky choruses that people loved. Embracing their extreme side combined with their innate talent to write hookier, poppy music is what makes What the Dead Men Say their true opus. You can hear every inspiration and every part of metal's storied history plus the unique sound that Trivium made on Shogun and Ascendancy on this album.
As it bleeds into me, let it sink in for you. As it bleeds into me, let it sink in for you. Tell them the story, tell them the truth is. Go!
This album finally saw the true potential of Trivium reached, silencing the elitists who wrote them off as merely arena rock and bringing their true fans to the ultimate point of climax. What the Dead Men Say is the ultimate culmination of years of metal history poured into one young band who had the weight of the world put on their shoulders through no choice of their own. A young band who had the mark of the next one thrown upon them before they were even old enough to drink. A band who at one point seemed like they were going to toil away in mediocrity and fall victim to the expectations that were given to them so early on. But in the end, they lived up to that insurmountable hype by embracing their true genius. And that true genius was the ability to combine metal's most extreme sounds, like death metal, with mainstream songwriting to create powerful choruses, circle pit-inducing verses, and fist-bumping, crowd-chanting bridges that all metalheads could gather around. And they inevitably brought balance to the metal community by taking that genius and writing some of metal's most digestible and epic music that quieted the elitist haters like me and saved the true Trivium fans from years of disappointment and embarrassment with the release of What the Dead Men Say, and even continued on In the Court of the Dragon. In the Court of the Dragon is every bit as good as What the Dead Men Say, proving that Trivium have finally found their groove. They've finally found a way to manage the weight of all those completely unfair expectations that were heaved upon them so early in their careers. And they really have become one of the greatest metal bands of all time. They have become undeniable geniuses. Thank you so much for watching. If you love this video, you can watch this video on how I went from deathcore hater to deathcore fan. Or you can watch this one about the best progressive metal albums of all time. Either way, I hope you enjoy. Long live metal.